He put $1 million cash on my kitchen table. Right there, in front of my wife, stacked, banded. He slid it across like he was paying a restaurant bill, and he looked at me. This man, 73 years old, 3 generations of money behind him. And he said, "You were never digging there." Just like that, like it was already settled, like I had already agreed. And I looked at him, and I said, "Senor Ashford, I already know who she is." Before I get into this, and I promise you, you need to hear all of it, I need 1 minute from you. This channel exists to make sure stories like this one don't disappear. Stories about people who had nothing but the truth, going up against people who had everything else. We are building this community right now, pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and every single one of them chose to be here. If you believe that powerful people should be held accountable, that money should not be able to bury the truth the way it tried to bury her, hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing. It keeps these stories alive. Now let me tell you what happened. I want to start from hour 1. Not from 12 years ago working that estate, not from 1998 when everything that matters actually began. From the hour I found her. Because everything, the money, the threats, the arrest, it all happened inside 48 hours. And I need you inside those hours with me. By the end of this, you'll understand why I was never really afraid of William Ashford. I was afraid of her. Of leaving her in the ground one more day. To understand what happened, you have to understand the estate. Not the man. The estate, because the estate is where she was, and the estate is what I knew better than anyone alive. 50 acres, north of the city, stone walls on 3 sides, iron gate at the front. The kind of property that doesn't have neighbors. It has distant tree lines. William Ashford III had been born into that house. His father built the east wing in 1961. His grandfather planted the oak trees along the main drive in 1938. Those trees were older than most people's entire family histories. I came to work that property in 2011. I was 44 years old. I had my own crew, 4 men, good men, men I trusted, and a landscaping contract that paid enough to keep my family stable and my workers employed year-round. For 12 years, I learned every inch of that land, every drainage problem, every root pushing up where it shouldn't, every low corner that flooded in March. I knew that property the way you know your own face in the morning. William Ashford III. 73 years old at the time of what I'm going to tell you. 3rd-generation investment banking. The family fortune was estimated at $6 billion. Old money, which means it was the kind of money that had never, not once, needed to explain itself to anyone. He had been married 3 times. His first wife was a woman named Eleanor Whitmore. They married in 1991. In 1998, Ashford told everyone she had left him, run off with another man. He said she'd sent a letter, said she wanted no contact. Within 14 months, he had remarried. I didn't work at the estate in 1998, but I had heard the story. The way you hear everything on a property like that, through staff, through passing comments, through the particular silence people use when they don't want to say the real thing out loud. I didn't know it yet, but someone had been waiting 26 years for what I was about to dig up. It was a Tuesday, early October. The light was already going gold by 4 in the afternoon. I was running a new irrigation line along the east corner of the property, a section I had never worked in depth before. Old growth back there. Roots everywhere. The ground was harder than I expected. My assistant, Marco, was with me. Good kid, 3 years on my crew. Around 4:15, I sent him back to the truck to get a coupling joint we were short on. The hardware store was 20 minutes each way. I had 40 minutes alone. I kept digging, The soil in that corner was dense, almost clay underneath. I hit resistance about 16 inches down. I thought root mass at first. Maybe old clay drainage tile. You find that sometimes on estates that old. I started digging around the obstruction, trying to read the shape of it. And then I saw it. It was a woman's shoe, a heel, still on the foot. I stopped. I didn't call out. I didn't panic. I sat back on my heels and I stayed very still. And in my mind, I was already making a list, a calm, specific list of exactly what to do next. First, I covered it back, carefully, exactly as it was. Second, I marked the spot with my spade in a way only I would recognize. Third, when Marco came back with the coupling joint, I told him I'd miscalculated the line and we needed to reroute. We packed up, moved to the west field, and worked there until 6. Marco never knew, and I made sure of that. Not to protect myself, to protect him. Whatever was in that ground was not something a 26-year-old kid needed to carry home with him. I went back alone before we left. While Marco was loading the truck, 15 minutes, I excavated by hand, quietly, carefully, just enough to confirm what I already knew. 2 photographs on my phone, then I covered everything back, perfectly, like the ground had never been touched. In my country growing up, you learn something young. When you find something dangerous, you do not scream. You think, because the person who screams is never the one who survives the situation. You go quiet. You make a plan. Then you act. I went home. I didn't tell my wife what I found, not yet. I sat at my kitchen table after dinner and I drank my coffee and I thought about that shoe for 4 hours. I thought about the woman who had worn it. I thought about where I was going to put the photographs. I thought about what a man with $6 billion could do to a man like me. And then my phone rang. 9 o'clock at night. Private number. I answered. It was Ashford himself, not a lawyer, not his estate manager, him. His voice was the same as it always was, smooth, unhurried, the voice of a man who has never once been told he needs to rush for anything. He said there had been a pipe survey that afternoon, that the engineers had flagged the east corner as unstable ground, not suitable for irrigation. We'd need to relocate the entire project to a different section of the property. Could I adjust the crew's schedule for tomorrow? I said, yes, sir, of course. I hung up. He had cameras I didn't know about on that corner of the estate. He'd watched the footage. He knew exactly what I had found. And by the time he called me that night, he had already decided how he was going to handle it. The first thing I did when I hung up was email the 2 photographs to my brother-in-law, Victor. Victor is a paralegal, not a lawyer, but close enough to understand things I didn't. I didn't explain. I just wrote, keep these safe. Don't open them tonight. I'll explain tomorrow. Then I got a paper notebook, not my phone, paper, and I wrote out exactly what I had found, when, where on the property, the depth, the condition. I described the shoe. I described what I could see beyond it. I signed and dated the page. I put it in an envelope, sealed it, drove to the 24-hour post office 3 miles away, and I mailed it to my own address. My father taught me that. Paper in the mail. A postmark doesn't lie. You cannot hack a postmark. Then I called Victor again. I asked him, hypothetically, if a person found evidence of a crime on private property while doing their job, what was their legal exposure? He was quiet for a long time. The answer was not reassuring. He said it was complicated. He said I would need to be very careful about how I proceeded. I thanked him and said goodnight. By midnight, I understood 2 things very clearly. Ashford knew I had found her, and I had almost no legal protection for what I was about to do. The only thing I had was the truth. And the truth, in my experience, is not always enough on its own. But it is the only thing you can actually build on. I didn't sleep. I made coffee, and I waited for morning. He came to my home the next morning at 9, no lawyers, no security, just him in a black car, alone. He rang the bell himself. I let him in. My wife was in the kitchen. I did not ask her to leave. I wanted a witness. He sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where my grandchildren do their homework on weekends, where my wife rolls out tamale dough at Christmas, where I drink my coffee every morning of my life. And he set a black bag on the surface, and he opened it. $1 million. Banded, stacked, real. I could see it from where I was standing. He was calm, completely calm. That is the thing I remember most. How calm he was. Like this was a routine transaction. It like he had done something like this before, and it had always ended the way he wanted it to. He explained that there had been a misunderstanding, that the east corner of the property had been a livestock burial area since the 1970s. Old horses, large animals, easy to misidentify in dense soil conditions. He had a document, already prepared. 1 page. I would sign to confirm that I had encountered old animal remains and had no concerns about the site. The money was a retirement gift for 12 years of loyal service. He said all of this with a straight face and steady eyes. My wife walked out of the kitchen. She looked at the bag on the table. She looked at me. She went to the back room without a word. I heard the door close quietly behind her. I stood there with that money on my table, and I want to be honest with you here, because this channel is about what actually happens, not what we wish had happened, not the clean version. I thought about my family. I thought about my crew. 4 men with wives and children and rent and car payments, who depended on those contracts I brought in. I thought about my house. I thought about what a man with $6 billion and 3 generations of lawyers could do to my landscaping license, my business, my reputation, my life. I gave all of that the weight it deserved. And then I thought about the shoe. I thought about the way it looked in that ground, and I thought about the fact that someone had put shoes on that woman, either before she died or after. Either way, she had shoes. She was a person who wore shoes and had somewhere to be and people who knew her name. Or she had been in the cold ground of that estate for 26 years. No grave, no marker, no ceremony. Nobody who knew where she was. No amount of money could make me leave her in the ground. I slid the bag back across the table. I told him, "I don't think those are horses, Mr. Ashford." And then I asked him to leave my home. He didn't threaten me, not directly, not right then. He picked up the bag, he straightened his jacket, and at the door he turned around and said very quietly, "I hope you've thought this through, Roberto," and he left. I went to the back room. My wife was sitting on the edge of the bed with her hands folded in her lap. I sat down beside her, and I told her everything. Within 4 hours of Ashford leaving my house, the machinery started moving. My brother-in-law called. A complaint had been filed, anonymously, with the State Landscaping License Board, alleged improper chemical disposal on a job site 2 years prior. Something I had never done, not once. But it was in the system now, attached to my license number. Even if it was completely baseless, it would take months and legal fees to resolve. That was the point. Then a lawyer I had never heard of called my business number. He told me politely that I had accessed a restricted area of the Ashford estate without authorization, civil trespass. That any photographs taken on private property without consent were illegally obtained. That his client was prepared to file both civil and criminal complaints unless I was willing to discuss a resolution. He used the word resolution 4 times in 3 minutes, I counted. That night, there were 2 men parked in an unfamiliar car on my street. They were there at 10 o'clock. They were there at midnight. They were gone by 6 in the morning. They were back the following evening. I want you to understand what that does to a person. To sit in your own house, the house you worked for, the house your children grew up in, and look out the window and see that. To understand that the pressure being put on you is not personal, it is routine. Men like Ashford do this the way other men send a strongly worded letter. It is just a tool in a toolbox, one of many. But here is what they did not know. The photographs were already with Victor. The letter was already in the mail with a postmark. And I had spent 12 years on that property. I knew where every security camera was positioned. I knew the coverage angle on that east corner. I knew there was a blind spot on the north side of the camera's field of view. I had stayed inside it for the majority of my work. They had partial footage, not all of it. That mattered more than they realized. I called Victor again. This time I told him everything. The shoe, the photographs, the bag on my kitchen table, what Ashford had said at my door, the car outside my house. Victor was quiet for a long time. And then he said, "Roberto, before you go to the police, there is one call I think you should make first." He had found something in an old newspaper archive. Eleanor Ashford, née Whitmore, a sister, Margaret Whitmore, 71 years old, living 3 states away. I found her number. I sat in my car in my own driveway. Not inside the house. Not at the table. Alone in the car. And I stared at that number for 10 minutes before I dialed. I had no script. I didn't know what I was going to say. I only knew that if there was a woman somewhere who had spent 26 years waiting for a phone call like this one, she deserved to hear it from a human voice, not from a news alert, not from a detective she'd never met, from someone who had been there, someone who had seen. She picked up on the second ring. I said, "Mrs. Whitmore, my name is Roberto Diaz. I used to work, at the Ashford estate outside the city. I think I need to tell you something about your sister." And she started crying before I finished the sentence. Not in reaction to what I said, in recognition. Like some part of her had always known this call was coming and had simply been waiting a very long time for it to arrive. She told me about Eleanor, about the last phone call, October 1998. Eleanor had called from the estate and left a voicemail on Margaret's answering machine, one of those old cassette tape machines. Margaret had saved that cassette for 26 years, had it transferred to digital, had listened to it hundreds of times. Eleanor said, "Maggie, I need you to remember something for me. If something happens to me, if I disappear, if they say I ran off, I didn't. I need you to remember that. I didn't run away." And then the line went dead. Margaret had reported it. In 1998, in 1999, in 2001, she hired a private investigator in 2006 who ran into nothing but legal walls. She sent letters to journalists. She filed missing persons extensions every year for a decade until the system told her there was nothing left to file. She had never stopped. She had simply run out of doors to knock on. Roberto stops. He presses his lips together for a moment before he continues. And then she said something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. The first thing she asked me, this woman who had lost her sister, who had spent 26 years fighting a wall that wouldn't move, the very first thing she said after I told her who I was and where I worked was, "Mr. Diaz, are you safe?" This woman asked if I was safe. He shakes his head slowly, quietly. I told her I was. I told her what I had found. I told her what I had done to protect the evidence. I told her what Ashford had placed on my kitchen table and what I had said to him. And I told her I was going to the police in the morning with or without anything else, but that I wanted her to know first, before anyone else. She said, "Go. Please, go now." So I went. The next morning, Victor and I walked into the police station together. I had the photographs on my phone and printed on paper. I had the sealed envelope from the post office, postmarked, unopened. I had a 2-page written account of every event in order. What I found, when, what Ashford said at my house, the bag, the document he brought, the car parked outside my home, and I had Margaret's name and phone number written on a notepad. The desk officer looked at me the way desk officers look at people who walk in with unusual stories. Polite, skeptical. He sent me to a detective. The detective was a man around 50. He had a face that had heard a lot of things and had learned not to dismiss them immediately, but also not to believe them immediately. He asked me to sit down. He asked me to tell him what I had. I told him everything. Calmly, in order. No emotion, no editorializing. Just the sequence of events. He asked me 3 times, "Are you certain about what you saw?" 3 times, and 3 times I said the same thing. Detective. I have been digging that land for 12 years. I know the difference between a root ball and a human foot. He took the photographs. He took photocopies of every document. He told me to say nothing about the site specifics to anyone. He said these things take time, that he would need to verify, escalate, that I should be patient and go home. I told him I understood. I mentioned the postmarked envelope. I still sealed, that documented everything in writing before any of this began. He looked at me for a moment, with something I had not yet seen from anyone in a uniform during this whole ordeal. Something like respect. "Go home, Mr. Diaz," he said. "We'll be in touch." That evening, a process server came to my door. Ashford's firm had filed a formal civil trespass notice against me. A delaying tactic, a way to frame me as a disgruntled former employee rather than a witness. Victor had warned me this was possible. We had prepared for it. I put the notice in a folder. I made dinner. I helped my youngest grandson with his spelling homework. And I waited. 2 days later, not 2 weeks, 2 days, my phone rang. It was the detective. He didn't say much. He said they had applied for and received a search warrant for the east corner of the Ashford property, that they had executed it that morning, that they had found what I described, that they had been able to confirm identification. Through dental records. 26-year-old dental records that Margaret Whitmore had kept in a manila folder in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet in her home, because she had never, not for one single year, accepted that her sister was simply gone. Eleanor Ashford. Confirmed. William Ashford III was arrested at 6 in the morning at the estate. 73 years old, he came to the door in his robe. He did not resist. The officers placed handcuffs on him on the steps of the home where she was buried. 40 feet from where he had eaten his breakfast, received his guests, and lived his life for 26 years. I heard about the arrest from Margaret. She called me. She was crying so hard she could barely form words. I was in the parking lot of a hardware store. I had gone to pick up supplies for a job, this ordinary Tuesday morning errand like any other, and I sat in my car and listened to her cry. She said, "Roberto, they're bringing her home." And I had to put the phone down on the seat and sit with the window open for a while, because I did not want my grandsons, who were in the back seat waiting for me, to see what was happening to my face. Ashford's lawyers dragged out the trespass complaint for 14 months before it was quietly dropped. In that time, I lost the Ashford contract, obviously. I lost 3 other clients who were afraid of being associated with the whole situation. Clients I had served for years. My crew stayed, all 4 of them. 2 of them took temporary pay cuts for about 5 months while we rebuilt the business. They didn't ask me to explain. They didn't ask for anything. They just kept showing up. Margaret flew out to meet me about 6 weeks after the arrest. She came to my house. My wife made dinner. We sat at the same kitchen table where Ashford had put the bag of money. The same table. And Margaret held my wife's hand and said thank you for what felt like an hour. She brought photographs of Eleanor, her wedding photos, a birthday photograph from 1994, both sisters with their arms around each other, laughing at something outside the frame. I looked at that photograph for a long time. I thought about how a person can be reduced to a shoe in the ground. How quickly a life gets buried. How easy it is for powerful people to make someone disappear and then simply continue their own life, right there, above the place where that person used to be. People ask me, was it worth it? $1 million? My business nearly gone. 2 men in a car outside my house in the dark? 14 months of legal threats? Was it worth it? I think about this. She was down there in the cold for 26 years. 26 years. And nobody came. Somebody should have come a long time before I did. But I was the one who came. I don't know if that means something to God, or to the law, or to whatever it is you believe in, but it meant something to her sister, and it meant something to me. That's enough. That has always been enough. I want to ask you something before you close this video, and I want you to be honest with yourself when you answer it. If you had been the one holding that shovel, if you had been the one who found her, what would you have done with the threats, with the men outside your house, with $1 million on your kitchen table and a family depending on you? I don't ask that to make you feel guilty. I ask it because I think most people already know what the right thing is. They've always known. The question is never really what is right. The question is whether you can afford to do it, and whether you can live with yourself if you don't. Roberto Diaz answered that question. At 56 years old, with everything on the line, he answered it. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something you want to hold on to, leave a comment below and tell me. What would you have done? I read every single one. And share this with someone who needs to hear it, because the best thing we can do for people like Eleanor is make sure the world knows her name.